Hello, welcome to the First Nations Housing Webinar Series, where we answer questions from community leaders. I'm your host, Jan Eeks. Before we get into it, I want to mention the First Nation Housing Conference, February 4th, 5th, and 6th in Thunder Bay. And that's an occasion to talk face-to-face with people who can help you do what you do. And I'll be there for the Builders Challenge again this year. I hope you'll be there too. For the webinar today, the presentation will be about half an hour long. Now, use the chat to ask questions at any time so you don't forget what you wanted to ask, but they'll be dealt with at the end of the presentation. So in today's session, we're going to hear about the intriguing topic of developing micro subdivisions in First Nation housing. Now, I never thought of any kind of subdivision in a First Nation community. Sylvia Apias is a familiar face to all of those who've been at the housing conference over the years. Sylvia, tell us what you do in life and what is this new pilot micro subdivision project?
Good morning, everyone. As John Eek said, my name is Siva Apia. I'm the Senior Housing Officer with Indigenous Services Canada. I'm also the lead for fire protection and ministerial loan guarantees with Indigenous Services Canada, Ontario region. Today, we're going to talk about the housing micro subdivisions, and I will go through a short presentation to give you a sense of where we started and where we are and what our proponents have done to get to where they are, and also showcase some of the work that has already been done as an example. So without further ado, I'll just go into my presentation. Just give me 1 second. I need to share my screen. Okay, so John, you can see my screen now?
Yep, got it.
Okay, perfect. So the guy you see on the roof is John Eeks when he was younger. I'm just kidding.
Well, he's almost got hair long enough. Okay.
So again, I'm with Indigenous Services Canada, Ontario region. Everything what I do is related to Ontario region. I don't know if there's anyone from out of province dialing in. We are more than happy to share what we do in Ontario, but anything related to your region, you may have to connect with your regional office in the province where you live or where your community is. Today, we'll look at some general information about the micro subdivision and how we got started, and then we'll get into our questions and answers. So as you can see on the screen, we've been working with First Nation partners and tribal councils and governments to increase the availability of affordable housing to First Nation members on reserve. Since 2016, we've invested quite a bit of funds into building and maintaining homes on reserve. This number may be outdated a little bit, but at the time when we pulled it a few weeks ago, we've supported about $435 million since 2016 in the building of homes and renovating existing homes and servicing lots for future construction of homes. With the budget 2022 commitment, the targeted investment for housing is expected to continue until 2026-2027. So this is based on the commitment made through budget 2022 with the government that was in power at that time. And we still have the same government. So why did we start thinking about micro subdivisions? And I think many of you may have heard these challenges or experienced these challenges in your communities. Overcrowding is coming up quite often in all of the studies that we do and all of the programming that we do, in all of the challenges that the chief and council face. There's population growth, there's homelessness and potential homelessness, not only off reserve, not only First Nation members experiencing homelessness off reserve, but also on reserve. And also insecure housing. So they may have housing here and there, but it's insecure, it's not permanent, it's house to house, every so often they move around and so on. That was also a challenge to manage at the community level. And then becomes the capacity to study, design, and execute housing projects within a very short time frame. So whether it's the FNHC or Indigenous Services Canada or any other governments, when we announce projects, as you know already, they are very short timelines, and there's not much time to do any study and design of projects in a proper way that you would do in an ideal situation. So there's capacity issues at the community level, housing managers and technicians are struggling with. And then we are also looking at the availability of serviced lots. There is many communities, at least in Ontario, running out of lots to build. They do not have serviced and available lots to build. And added to that is many communities also outgrowing their reserve land. So there's not enough suitable land to build residential buildings. And also inadequate infrastructure, whether when it comes to water, sewer, electrical, and so on. Many communities are running out of capacity to service homes. Even if you build homes, they don't have the ability to service them. So looking at all these challenges, we thought we can introduce something that at least address some of the challenges. So recognizing all this, we put in a request to Treasury Board and the government to seek some funding to address those immediate challenges in First Nation communities by allocating some funds to support some of the activities below, which includes planning, preparation, project activities for new subdivisions, small extension to existing subdivisions, and construction of new residential subdivisions. So as you know, and many of you probably have done subdivisions, the traditional subdivisions take too long, too expensive. A lot of times it doesn't get to the construction stage. It gets stalled at the study stage or the design stage. And when it comes to construction stage, it's very expensive, it's not affordable. And aside from the money, there's also the other challenges of not having enough land, enough infrastructure, and so on. So that's when we started thinking about how about a micro subdivision. So just so that we can address the immediate challenges, immediate housing challenges in communities where people are becoming homeless in their own community and also struggling off reserve to find affordable homes to grow their families in. So this is the first time ever under the housing portfolio, we were allowed to do subdivisions, so micro subdivisions. So we embarked on that approach, and we increased, in order to increase the availability of lots for social housing. So from IFC's perspective, the approach will provide an opportunity for the rapid development of lots for future construction of homes for low income and vulnerable population in communities where the availability of lots is limited and the demand for housing is increasing. So it's not necessarily for every community. It's more targeted towards communities that are growing in population, and their land is shrinking, and their infrastructure is not adequate. So we reached out to Indigenous partners like Tribal Council to determine the viability and the need for a micro subdivision projects in their member nations. And we asked them to recommend some communities to ISC to pilot this program. So we offered one project for each tribal council area, and that was to start in 23-24 fiscal year. So that was last fiscal year. We offered one project, but one project in two communities. Every tribal council was given the opportunity to identify two First Nation communities within their tribal areas to execute this pilot project. So the community selection is not done by ISC, rather is done by the tribal councils in their area. So in stage one of the micro subdivision, we've broken down the stages into 3 for micro subdivision, just so that we don't rush through, but it's still much faster than doing a traditional subdivision. So in stage 1 of the project, we asked the tribal councils to connect with the communities and find out what their needs are. So once they've done that prioritization, they've selected 2 communities or more. But then they went on a roadshow to do engagement with the chief and council and the community members in those communities. After that, they've entered into a contract with the engineering company to do a preliminary study on where the community might be able to build some additional homes using this micro subdivision. At the end of that study, we asked the engineering company to recommend the project to ISC with some of the details that we had asked for. So we had asked the engineering company to take a look at the water capacity, sewer capacity, the floodplains, the suitability of land, a wide variety of technical requirements that you would need in order to build and maintain a home in a healthy home in the communities. So each tribal council or each interested tribal council to recommend the project to ISC, and then we put some parameters around what this micro subdivision will look like. So we did hold a town hall meeting with all the tribal councils, and we collected some feedback. And after that feedback, we developed a detailed guideline document, which I can share with you guys later, which will outline what is the size of this micro subdivision. So we said a maximum of 100 meter in length with land available for lot development on both sides of the road. So we said we'll start with a 100-meter extension of roads, water, sewer, electrical, and whatnot. But we asked them to identify site location where there's possibility for expansion later on. In terms of lot sizes, we recommended we go with 10, 12, or 15, but really the community can pick the lot size anywhere from 10 meter to 15 meter wide, and there's no limit on how depth you can go into the lots. In order to put this into some visionary, we got an architect to do some model homes to showcase what this micro subdivision would look like. So what you're seeing on this picture is a 10-meter frontage lot and different types of homes. So the homes alone is not included in the micro subdivision projects. That is for the community to decide and build later on. Some of the models presented here is just to give an idea of what type of homes you can build with the 10-meter frontage, which is about 32 feet wide lots. You will see there's 2-story homes, single-story homes, wheelchair accessible homes, granny flats, whatever you call them. So you see the wheelchair accessible homes here on this map. Just to give a sense to the communities, what does this would look like, because they are all used to having 30, 40 meter frontage lots. And some people were just panicking that's too close, we don't live like that, and so on. Again, we are going back to not replacing what you would normally build as a traditional subdivision, but rather to address homelessness in the communities, maybe elders in the community, or simply there is no chance of building any homes unless you get the ATR approved, or the land expands or whatnot. But what do you do in the meantime? So we looked at it, the communities looked at it as, okay, what is better than being overcrowded? What is better than being homeless? What is better than being insecure, having insecure housing? Just to have a roof over people's head, to raise their families in a very healthy environment. In terms of the lots alone, there's some modeling about what a 100-meter extension would look like. What you see here is a 10-meter frontage, 100-meter extension on both sides of the road that you'll be building, or the communities will be building. We also did some modeling what a 12-meter frontage would look like, and again, similar type of idea, having different types of homes for communities' needs based on their population and the special needs. And similar idea, this is a 12-meter frontage, 100-meter extension, both sides of the road. You'll be developing a minimum of 17 lots with the 100-meter extension. Some communities where they may have to have septic tanks or septic fields and so on. We also did 15-meter frontage, and that is the maximum we are supporting through the micro subdivision, and some modeling of what that would look like here. So it's a bird eye view of what these houses will look like. In order to address some of the challenges identified through our town hall meetings with the technicians, privacy was issued as maybe a challenge. So the architect has put in some design options in there. You can have fences, and the size of the home was identified as a challenge. First Nation people traditionally have larger families. How do we increase the living space inside the house? So he put in some shed in there. Of course, kids, you don't want them to be playing in the front yard because this is going to be a pretty tight subdivision. So allowing some room in the back, some play area for the kids in a safe environment. These are some of the mitigations that the architect was able to put into these designs and showcase what the communities can do themselves in order to overcome some of those barriers or challenges. So in terms of the funding, we offered up to $50,000 for each tribal council to complete that stage 1 preliminary study. And then projects will be considered for funding based on the cost effectiveness rationale provided by the selection and the funding availability. So far, we've been able to fund every project that every tribal council came up with. Of course, we limited them up to 2, maximum 3. But so far, we've been able to fund all the projects. We didn't have to restrict any tribal councils from that maximum. Following the proposal submission, the projects may be funded for several years based on the schedule and the various stages identified in each of the projects. So it's not a one-time, 1 year, one-time fix. This is because I mentioned earlier, it's a 3-stage process. We've done stage 1 for about 10 communities right now, and we are in stage 2 with them. And we will continue into next fiscal year once the stage 2 is done into stage 3, which is the construction phase. There is no push for any communities to opt into it. It's totally voluntary. The community will move at their own pace. So there is no real deadline on when you have to start and when you have to finish. The tribal councils are working with the communities at their own pace to get this going. And we are open to any partnership. If there's another source of funding that's available and the community wants to do more than the 100-meter extension, we are completely open to stacking any other funding available through other sources. So here's an example of one tribal council approach. For stage 1, task list was to kick off the meeting with the community. The technical services project team and the members of the community will meet. The project team will tour the community along with the community members to inspect the proposed micro subdivision areas and interview public work operators and explore different sites to discuss options based on visual information. So this is after that engagement activity is completed. Now we are getting into more technical. A technical team from the tribal council or contracted by the tribal council visit the community. They look at what's available, what their capacity is in terms of infrastructure, and they ask the community to identify 3 different areas where they might want to develop. Then the technical team did their investigation in all 3 different sites, and they recommended one site that's more suitable for the development. So once a site is selected, they also did a conceptual design of a micro subdivision for the communities. So they reviewed the pros and cons of each of the 3 areas. And then based on the pros and cons, they engage with the chief and council. They provide an option analysis between the 3 sites. And then the community would select one of the 3 sites for further development. And as you know, in that process, they also looked at all existing infrastructure information, survey information, geotechnical information, if available. They took some pictures while on site, and um, they look at accessibility, like everything that you would normally do on a traditional subdivision, but at a smaller scale, at a much faster pace. And then considering all that, they developed a conceptual drawing and a site plan for the community to showcase what this would look like. So what you see on the screen, it's an actual work done in one community. So this community, they have chosen this site here for the development. What you see in red is the 100-meter extension currently proposed. What you see in blue is the future expansion. So we know we don't have to stop at the 17 or 100-meter extension. There's opportunity for them to continue to build in that area. This is an example of how every community might be different. In this community, the only site that was available is where this is happening, but there is a lagoon close by. So the technical team has looked at the regulations around building in close proximity to a lagoon. So they looked at measurements, they looked at provincial requirements, and they adjusted the length required in between the lagoon and the subdivision. So this is going to be further developed in stage 2 with more formal studies and designs. The same site, if you zoom into that site, they also identified entranceways, culverts, where the fire hydrant should go, the ditches, and the whole bit. They also looked at the existing service lines. In this map, you see before you even reach the subdivision, the services has to be extended from where they are to the subdivision. So that was an oversight on our part, but we have agreed to cover the cost to bring the services from where they are right now to the beginning of subdivision, and then we count the 100-meter extension from the start of the subdivision to the end of the subdivision. Here's the community. I just had a meeting yesterday. They have gone ahead and done the stage 1. They identified 3 different sites. There's the option A, option B, and option C. We had a meeting with the community yesterday to look at all the challenges and opportunities in those sites and what the possibility is of expanding or working on one of those sites. The community has now given their preference. The technicians will now go back and finish their work on further developing that chosen site. So once that conceptual design is done, and then the technical team is also expected to do a cost estimate for doing the stage 2. So the consultant team will be looking at fee metrics to complete the engineering work in that site for phase 2 funding. A final summary report will be also expected of the engineering company for us to give for them to give us the scope and the cost required for phase 2 of the project. So there's no real application required from the First Nation. Everything is a continuum basis. So we start with the preliminary study, and then we do stage 2 is the design, and then stage 3 is the construction. And this particular stage 1, it only takes like 2 months for the technicians to travel to the community and look at the potential sites and prepare the final report so that we can enter into phase 2, which would normally have taken in a year if you were doing the feasibility study for a regular subdivision. Here's an example of a stage 2. So once that stage 1 is completed, we expect the engineers to prepare a report identifying what the stage 2 would look like. And this is the timeline and the scope they recommended for stage 2. I mean, this is just one example. You'll see by the end of stage 2, we'll reach 99% design for the subdivision. So that's basically the end of my presentation. Here's a little bit more examples of, I've had a few more examples of sites, but I will stop there maybe and see if there's any questions. I think we finished about 5 minutes early, but we can pick it up later if you have any other questions.
Oh, we'll pick up the time easily with questions. I have an interesting one from Shannon Ashe. She says, how is two-eyed seeing engaged in this project? I'm not even sure what that means, but
Can you repeat that again?
how was two-eyed seeing engaged in this project? Can we turn on Shannon's microphone there and ask her to explain that? Shannon, are you there? Sounds like I hear a microphone coming on. Two-eyed seeing doesn't mean anything to you. Let's see, I've got another message here to take a look at. My mic is not on, says Shannon.
It is now.
It is now. Hello, Shannon.
Hi.
What-
I'm
what do
a
you-
planner.
Claire.
I live in Mi'kma'ki
Yeah.
in Nova Scotia. And two-eyed seeing is the concept of being able to see the world both through a Western lens and through a First Nations lens.
Ah.
We use the word Etowaptamump here in Mi'kma'ki. That's what it is in Mi'kmaq. And
Okay.
so, but I have an extensive background in planning and development, over 10 years experience. And so what I'm seeing, what I'm interested in knowing about is what the thoughts are, especially from ISK, around how values and things like that are brought in, like when the engagement happens in communities, what are the sort of things? One of the things that struck me during the presentation were about kids playing in the backyards. And in our community, the kids don't just play in their backyards, they play in the front. So how are you planning in a subdivision for communities whose kids play together, usually who are going to be in the front yards? And how are you laying that out? That's a really I think that's important for community values.
Yeah, so that's a good question. When we started this project, yes, some communities said, "Hey, this is not for us. We don't really have a huge homelessness issue. We are pretty much managing our housing stock. It's not for us," and that's fine. They just opted out of it. But then there were a number of communities. Again, this is only I'm talking in Ontario, where they are still stuck in the ATR process. They don't have any land to build, or they have very limited land. The homelessness is growing. So it's all looking back at what are some of the challenges in the communities and how we can address it. And there's some, give or take, depending on each of the communities. The examples I've shown in where there's some play areas for the community, for the children in the backyard, it's really up to the community to decide whether they want to have the fences or they don't want to have the fences, whether they want to have play areas in the house or they want to have more of a community play areas. But this is looking at more about, is this better than having overcrowded housing, or is this better than having homelessness? Is this more suitable for seniors, perhaps? Is this suitable for a community where the families may be living together, but they are not total strangers? It might be your grandma living next door to you, or it's just in a different roof, as opposed to 3-4 generations of the families living in the same house. So every community looked at differently, and they design it with their designer as to how they want to proceed. The houses themselves are not part of the micro subdivision, so we are only doing the lot developments and the extension of the services. The homes will be designed by the community based on their local needs. So if their need is for youth, then they'll design it accordingly. If their need is for young families or elders or whatnot, they design the homes based on what the community need is.
Okay.
And this doesn't take away anything that they would do otherwise in terms of regular subdivisions. So there is a pretty long wait list for regular subdivision. And even if we do have funds become available, a lot of communities don't have enough land to build. So, with this micro subdivision, there's a minimum requirement of developing 17 lots. If you were to do regular subdivision, you're not developing more than 6 or 7 lots.
All right. Well, actually, it sounds like you have a great deal of flexibility based on local needs.
Absolutely.
And so you're throwing
everything presented here is just an example of what communities have done in their own, based on their own need.
Right. You have a structure where you're going through tribal councils, and it's just a pilot program now, but we have a question: can other First Nation communities have access to this program? And we never heard of it. My tribal council never approached our community. How do people make connection with this? Do they have to go to their tribal councils and through that way, or what's the mechanism to try and get involved in this?
So again, this is only for Ontario First Nations, and if your community is in Ontario, I would say yes, connect with the tribal councils, and if you need a contact at your tribal council, by all means you can contact me or any one of our team at the Indigenous Services Canada. We'll connect you with the tribal council contact that we are dealing with. Not all the tribal councils have opted into it. We have about 16 tribal councils in Ontario. I think we have only about 8 or 9 opted into it, and some tribal councils basically said, communities in my area are not interested in this, or they just don't know enough about it. They're waiting for other communities to go through the process, and that they can put a feel to it before they start something on their own. So perhaps they'll be able to visit one of these communities that has gone through, or talk to that community and get a feel of it. Maybe they'll come on board later. But at this time, as of yesterday, we have 10 communities going into stage 2. So they successfully completed stage 1. After stage 1, of course, there's an option for them to drop out if this is not for them. But everybody who has gone through stage 1, they are anxious to get into stage 2. So far we approved 10 communities in Ontario for stage 2.
But we have no completed housing. We have nobody living in the micro communities yet.
Everything is on paper right now. So the stage 3 is the construction.
When do you project we'll actually have living examples of these communities?
So majority of the stage 2 projects are expected to complete by March 31st this year.
Oh, really?
And as early as, yes, we are working on a pretty expedited schedule for this, because again, the whole intent is to address the immediate housing needs and crisis in communities. We can't take 2 years to design.
Your schedule amazes me. I've never.
It is, and when we started, we didn't think we can do it either, but we got some really good engineering firms doing great work. We don't. And we cut through a lot of red tape on the government side. We are not doing any technical reviews on these projects. We are completely leaving it to the tribal councils and the engineer on board to do the work that's required. So that cut down on me waiting for my engineer to review this and approve it. That we like, one engineer is good enough, or 2 engineers is good enough. We don't need to have a third one to look at this the study and design. So like I said, on both sides, we cut down on a lot of time-consuming exercises, and we really want to get to the construction stage. So as in early next year, as early as April, May, we are hoping to get into the construction phase, which will nicely, drive us into summer construction next year. So, if if you were to do the approvals in spring, they'll be able to get a contractor in place, get all the paperwork and designs done, finalized, do the tendering, and then get into construction phase. After
So
that, then construction of homes. So I don't know how long it would take, but let's say 6 to 8 months for the lot developments, and then communities can build homes through any sources of fund that they have available. So especially CMHC is really excited because they have money through Section 95 to build homes, but they don't have money to develop infrastructure or subdivisions. So hopefully this will enable community to access housing funding that's out there by having service lots available.
So we're looking at having some real housing in 2026, I guess.
It could be late 2025, depending on how quickly the community can move forward with the actual work, the physical work.
How cold the winter is.
Well, we are aiming for summer construction. So if we do spring approval, summer construction, and then final completion by late summer, they could potentially get servicing and design done. If they're doing modular homes, they can have the foundation done, bring the homes on the winter road and fix them up. It's
fantastic, because
it depends on what's doable, really.
I assume as soon as you get some real examples lived in, then you're going to be flooded with them in.
You know, not all of our First Nation communities are in that traditional 40-meter subdivision. A lot of them have already started subdividing existing lots in order to accommodate more homes in their community. So for some communities, this is completely normal. It's not that every community in Ontario is looking for that 40-meter or 50-meter frontage lots. Some communities are very crowded in Ontario. They just don't have any room to grow. So they themselves have started subdividing existing lots in order to accommodate more homes within the community.
Okay. Patrick Taff has raised his hand.
Hi, I don't have my video on, and I'll skip that part. Hi, Siva. Thanks. So Chapel Cree is taking place in this. We're at the end of stage 2, looking forward to stage 3 construction this summer, as you said. My question is, so I'm already exploring funding options for actual housing construction. CMHC Section 95 is an option, but generally speaking, they only fund a couple of houses, like 3, usually. And we have 20 lots, or we're going to have up to 20 lots. So there's also the Housing Gap Fund that I've already applied to for the last 2 serviced lots that Chapel Cree has. And then there's going to be another round of Housing Gap funding, that's ISC Housing Gap Fund, available for this following year. But my communications so far are that I shouldn't apply for housing funding before the lots are finished. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity to have kind of a better connection between the 2 programs, because they do actually seem tailor-made for each other. On the one hand, the micro subdivision is giving you, up to 20 lots, and the housing fund, the Housing Gap Fund funds up to 10 units. So, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of connection between them. So that's my question or comment, because I'd like to have the work on the Housing Gap Fund application done before we even break ground for the micro subdivision lots in the springtime.
Absolutely. So there is a life example of a community that's going through the process. As he explained, they are in stage 2 of the project and hoping to go into stage 3 and start construction later in the year. To answer your question, so CMHC Section 95, depending on the number of applications, they usually have like 3 to 5, sometimes 6, 7 units available for each First Nation. And through the Housing Gaps Fund, right now we have up to 10 homes available between this year and next year. And that, again, we are in a in an uncertain time when it comes to political will. So we don't know what the future hold in terms of funding. Based on the commitments of the current government, we have funding available until 26-27 fiscal year. So if that commitment is kept, then we will have funding available to build additional homes. So it's the matter of funding availability and how quickly the communities can move on. So between this year and next year, I think to finish the micro subdivision and to build 10 homes, I think you're going to be pretty busy. But the lots can also be used for individual home ownership. So if the community wants to introduce home ownership in their community, then we can also support them through Ministerial Loan Guarantee Program. So you could have a mix of social housing, home ownership, CMHC housing, ISC housing. Band can build their own homes. Again, the source of fund that you normally would use for building homes is what you would use to build the actual homes. Again, I mean, in Chapel Cree example, you're going to be pretty busy between this year and next year, and we have to wait for the budget announcement for next year, which is may or may not happen in March, right? As we all know. I don't have any inside information. All I know is what you know, what you hear in the media about where the government is and the funding level is.
Okay, somebody is asking that they missed part of the participation. And as a note here says, we will be emailing all participants a recording of the session. So we have our hand raised here by Chris Marco. Chris, you want to unmute and...
Hi there, can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Yeah, you don't want to let Chris ask questions on this session.
Siva, you mentioned
yes,
that
Chris.
Indigenous Services Canada has commissioned engineers, architects, etc. Will these concepts or the finalized plans for say the tiny homes, granny flats, will you be sharing with the First Nations those plans?
So just a small correction. It's not our engineers doing it. It's the engineers hired by the Tribal Council doing it. The second part of the question, yes, the whole idea of the pilot project is that this information will be available for other communities wanting to learn, study, implement in their own communities. So that is in our statement of work and the approval letter, and we'll be able to share the lessons learned and the final reports and so on with other communities wanting to move on.
Okay, so as opposed to waiting for a final report, is it possible for First Nations to receive the plans for these houses now if they're done, as opposed to a year from now? That way we don't have to reinvent the wheel at our end.
So the housing plans are not part of the subdivision. The subdivision is not the houses themselves. However, there are a number of housing plans already available. I think FNHC has just completed recently through our funding a number of housing plans, and those are construction ready. So if you're interested, I think you can get those from FNHC, or you can just send me an email. I can share them with you.
Okay, I'll send you an email. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Great, not duplicating the wheel. We've got a lot of questions about the proximity of the houses causing problems with septic fields. You want to go back over that? How do you deal with that?
Yes, some communities that we are piloting are on septic field, and we have done some work in that area. Not we, but the engineers have done some work in that area. What they are looking at is if it's not septic tanks, communal septic fields. I have some examples of that. Again, it's not fully developed. What they're looking at doing is 2 septic fields on either side of the road behind the houses. So it doesn't take up any room that where the kids might be playing or the tenant might be wanting to do some garden or grow some garden or whatnot. It would be beyond the property line there'll be a service road and the septic field. Just keep talking. I will try and see if I can pull one of those plans being contemplated
Okay.
by the engineers.
Can this whole project be used for existing plans already in place?
Existing plans. Well, if you have subdivisions, you don't need to develop them.
Right.
So I'm not too sure what is
How
it
that
that
would
the
fit.
community wants to do. Yeah.
Is Ontario a pilot project? I think the answer is yes. And will it be rolled out across Canada to access this funding? You're already rolling out, are you not?
Only in Ontario.
Only in Ontario.
So it's not really up to us if the other regions wants to follow suit, but we are more than willing to share everything we have done, including the application process, the guidelines, some of the lessons learned, maybe even some of the reports that's created out of this, just so that they are able to get a sense of, what the next steps might be for their own region.
Patrick has an addition to his comment. He was the gentleman who was already finishing stage 2 when he said it was moving very fast. But he said, I wanted to mention CMHC Affordable Housing Fund as a possible source of funding for the construction.
Yeah, absolutely. And they do large scale projects too. So you might be able to do a lot more than the 10 that we talked about through IFC.
So the recap while you're looking for that is that your project is about the land and the layout, not on the construction of the house itself. So the house plans, the details, that's all separate from your project. You're just getting the infrastructure that allows them to be grouped close together.
So here is a sample of a design that we have developed for a community on septic fields. So you see the 100-meter extension, the future expansion, and then you see the breakdown of the lots. There's 22 lots, I think, if I can see right, and fire hydrants and all that. So behind the property line is what you see where the septic fields are proposed. So, it needs to be further studied to make sure, there's enough flow, there's enough elevation and whatnot. But the idea is to have the septic fields behind the property line and not to take away any of the living spaces that the community members might be using for play areas, gardens or whatnot, and to make the servicing easy. So this was a preliminary design. In the final design, you might see a service road so that these septic fields are serviceable without getting into individual lots and homes easily.
Right. This takes a
So
lot
here's an
more
example of-
pre-planning, particularly for the flow of the water, to make sure that you have good flow all the way to the septic field. Huh?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why we didn't go with the community running this project for the pilot stage. We went with tribal councils because there's increased technical capacity at the tribal councils, and also the tribal council is contracting with an engineering company to do some of the detailed work. It is pretty technical, and in order to expedite the completion of it, we only went with tribal council managing these projects in partnership with the community in their area.
We're getting a lot of good feedback. The people are excited about this project. So I assume you're going to be talking about it at the conference?
I will be at the conference. There's a general presentation planned at the conference, not specifically on micro subdivision, but this will be one of the topics we talk about.
Okay.
But we'll be at the trade show booth and so on, so you're welcome to drop by and talk to us.
And you'll receive an email telling you how to get to watch this whole thing over again. That usually comes up one day after the webinar as they're coming along. I think that it's getting close to time to wrap it up. Do you have something else that you felt like you left out?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, there is a detailed guidelines document that we shared with the tribal council and potential participants. I don't know how much more time we have, but I can
Well,
quickly
I
share.
can give you another 5 minutes easily if you'd like.
Okay, that's great. So this is the actual guidelines we developed. It says 23, 24, that because that's when it was launched. But the actual guidelines goes into a bit more information about why we are doing this and what we are doing. And again, when we started this, we did a town hall meeting with all the tribal councils to see if this is something would be useful or appropriate. And there was enough interest for us to proceed with this. There's some parameters around what you can and cannot do. And then there's some eligible activities. So we gave a little bit more detail around what this funding could be used for. It could be site selection, clearing, site preparation, geotechnical investigation, soil testing, pretty much anything that you have to do on in order to build a house, to prepare the lots to build a house. We did also have some bad examples of people just rushing to build a house without proper planning, without proper subdivisions, and then they run into all kinds of issues with servicing. So we want to, the goal of government programming now is to prepare and give the control to the First Nations to plan, design, and build according to code and prevailing legislative requirements and best practices. So that's where you see we started doing multi-year programming, longer-term funding, a lot of capacity building at the tribal council level and the First Nation level. We provided some additional funding for salaries and benefits for First Nations, and we'll be doing the same for the tribal councils, just so that we are not waiting for a crisis to happen. People are planning ahead and they have projects ready on the shelf to go when the funding is announced. They're not running around looking for a site and a project after the funding is announced. So here it is, the seed funding stage 1. Stage 2 is the full feasibility study and the design. Stage 3 is the construction and how you apply for this funding. So that's a little bit more detailed guidelines. And then there is also a simple application form for the tribal council to complete. So we did do a walkthrough of the applications with the tribal councils in order to get the applications back. So after the initial application, there is no application for stage 2 and stage 3. Essentially, stage 1 report becomes the application for stage 2. Stage 2 report becomes the application for stage 3.
That's far too logical. That just makes too much sense.
Yeah, it's again, we are trying to cut down as much as possible on the paperwork and get to the construction stage. So here is the application. We asked them for a brief description of the project and the scope. We asked them how they will choose their communities. If you have 5 communities and you have to choose 2, we've given them some ideas of indicators that you can use for the community selection. We asked them how you will do the community engagements and the community endorsement. Of course, we don't want tribal council or ISC starting a project on reserve unless the community is fully on board and the chief and council supporting it. And then we asked them about what you will do for the preliminary planning study. And we asked them to recommend how they plan to recommend the project to ISC. So in some tribal councils, they extended the community engagement to all of their communities. So they went out and talked to all 6 communities. Then they did the community prioritization so that communities themselves are aware of what's going on in their neighbor's community and so on. And then we asked them about the funding, how much the total cost is, how much ISC is expected to contribute, which is capped at $50,000 for stage 1 and any other sources of funding. And then we ask them, why do you need this project? This is where the communities have to identify why they need this project. So, if they don't have overcrowding, they are pretty much managing their housing stock. They have enough land, their infrastructure is not a concern. They may not be an ideal candidate for this micro subdivisions. And then we asked for contact information. That's it, just 2-page application.
2-page application. I am thoroughly impressed with your whole presentation, Sylvia. I think that we're seeing some real progress in housing through projects like this, and having them dovetail with existing projects, and using all the resources possible that's available. I thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you in Thunder Bay coming up. The recording is available as of tomorrow at the firstnationshousingconference.com/webinars, but you'll get an email that will give you that detail. Our next session, January 21st, is with Gail Lawlor, who's going to show us the connection between family health and energy efficient work. That there's a connection, a two-way street here between those two. So you don't want to miss that. Don't forget the First Nation Housing Conference, February 4, 5, 6 in Thunder Bay. Register now and come have fun with us. I'll be doing a rather major construction project this year, so come and see what's going on. And as you leave, there's an exit survey. It's going to pop up on your screen. Please sit there and answer it. Please fill this out and develop it. This helps us to develop our webinar series. And if you have any specific topics you'd like to hear about, let us know. I'm Jan Eeks. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.